In the quiet suburbs of Hayward, California, life is routine. Neighbors wave, cars pass, and behind the doors of unassuming homes, families live out their years in peace. But sometimes, peace is just a performance. Sometimes the man next door, the grandfather, the former scout leader, is simply waiting for a knock he has dreaded for 45 years. It is November 20th, 2018. A car pulls into a driveway and crunches into the bumper of a parked vehicle. It seems like a simple accident, a clumsy mistake. But the driver isn't a neighbor, and the mistake isn't real. The man who walks out of the house is 74-year-old John Arthur Getreu. He smiles. He is polite. He doesn't know that the accident in his driveway is the beginning of the end. He doesn't know that the friendly stranger is an undercover officer, and he certainly doesn't know that science has finally caught up to his secrets. This is the story of a ghost, a man who drifted through decades, leaving a trail of bodies in his wake, hiding behind the mask of a suburban father. For half a century, he thought he had won. But DNA doesn't forget, and on this day, neither does the law. The investigation that led to John Getreu's driveway began not in 2018, but in the terrifying silence of the 1970s. In the hills surrounding Stanford University, young women were disappearing. The first was Leslie Marie Perloff, a 21-year-old Stanford graduate working at a local law library. Bright, ambitious, with her whole life ahead of her. On February 13, 1973, she disappeared. Her orange Chevrolet Nova was later found parked near an old quarry. Her body was discovered nearby in the hiking area known as the Stanford Dish. She had been strangled with a ligature, her own floral scarf, knotted tight around her neck. The killer had left something behind, DNA. But in 1973, that evidence was a lock without a key. It sat in a cold storage locker, waiting for technology to evolve. 45 years later, Santa Clara County cold case investigators finally turned the key. They used forensic genetic genealogy, comparing the crime scene DNA to public family trees. The branches led them straight to the former Boy Scout leader living quietly in Hayward. When investigators bring John into the interrogation room, they play a game. They don't tell him why he's there. They want to see if the mask slips. Sergeant Cortez starts with the basics: name, history. But then he drops the first breadcrumb. Were you ever in the military? Have you ever been arrested? John says no. A clean record. A good man. But Cortez knows better. I found out something happened in Germany. Can you tell me about that? And just like that, the first crack appears. John admits he was arrested in Germany. The charge? Murder. In 1963, an 18-year-old John Getreu was living on a US military base in West Germany. A 15-year-old girl named Margaret Williams went to a dance. She met a boy. She never came home. Her body was found the next day. She had been sexually assaulted and strangled. John was convicted of rape and murder in Germany, but because he was a juvenile, the system failed Margaret Williams. He served only 6 years. He was released, his record sealed, his past erased. He returned to America, a free man with a dark hunger that prison hadn't cured. Back in the interrogation room, Cortez pivots. He brings up the hills, the Stanford Hills. Did you ever go in the hills, like in the area around Page Road? John denies it. He says he hiked there with the scouts, but never near Page Mill Road, never near the crime scenes. Then Cortez shows him the picture. Leslie Perloff. You ever see this young lady? John looks at the face of the woman he strangled 45 years ago, and he shrugs. No, who's that? He calls her cute. He plays the part of the confused old man perfectly. But then he makes a mistake. A slip of the tongue that chills the room. When asked about the DNA evidence, John gets confused. He starts talking about two persons. Especially these persons, or these two persons. Cortez pauses. He hasn't mentioned a second victim. What two persons? John backpedals. He mumbles about the girl up on the hill. He tries to cover his tracks, but the damage is done. He has inadvertently revealed knowledge only the killer would have, because Leslie Perlov wasn't the only one. In March 1974, a year after Leslie was found, another body was discovered along Sand Hill Road. Janet Taylor, 21 years old, the daughter of the university's former athletic director. Like Leslie, she had been strangled. John Getreu had been hunting in those hills, and for decades he thought he had gotten away with it. The investigators press him. They tell him his DNA is on Leslie. They tell him there is no other explanation. They offer him a chance to explain why. But John stares at the brick wall of evidence and refuses to climb it. "I'm not guilty." He asks for a lawyer. The interview ends. But the science did not. In January 2019, evidence from Janet Taylor's murder was retested. The results were undeniable. DNA found on the torn crotch area of her pants matched John Getreu. It was a specific, brutal detail that confirmed the sexual nature of the crime and sealed his fate. On September 14, 2021, a jury convicted him of Janet Taylor's murder. 2 years later, on January 10, 2023, seeing no way out, John pleaded guilty to the murder of Leslie Perlov. He was sentenced to 7 years to life, to be served consecutively. John Arthur Getreu spent his life hiding in plain sight. He was a father, a husband, a scout leader. He lived among us, wearing the mask of normalcy while the families of Margaret, Leslie, and Janet lived in a nightmare that had no end. He died in custody of natural causes in September 2023. He took his final secrets to the grave. But thanks to the persistence of science and the investigators who never gave up, he did not take his freedom with him. Sometimes the past doesn't just haunt you, it hunts you down. And with that, I'll see you in the next one.